day. I've no idea what day it is.
6.
It's episode 6. Don't know what day it is. Is it Christmas still? Is it New Year's? Anyway, enjoy this next episode. General idea of layout. Batteries in the corner. Pumps tucked up against that. Ignore all this stuff, that's just a balancing. You won't see any of that. All being well, so the rack will sit on a piece of flat box section, 2 uprights, which I'm going to do in a minute, up from the frame rail to support that, and then that'll be braced across. There'll be a bar that comes out the back of that, across the back of the boot floor, and then into this side, to the other side of the rack, and then another piece here, so it'll be like a fully braced top and bottom, mounted to the frame rail, so it's nice and strong and secure. Batteries there, pump there, make a little rack for the solenoids to hide behind there so you can't see them. And that's it really. So let's start making some uprights. So the idea is to find position on the trunk floor where you want your uprights to mount. So now I've got it figured out in the back, like a mock-up of how it's all gonna mount. I'll probably work out where I want the uprights to go and then mark that on the frame rail, and then with a piece of 2x2 box, I think it's 2x2 or 50 by 50, something like that. I'll mark the squares on the trunk floor, drill those, cut it, and then the box section can go through, make the top piece for the battery trays to mount on, tack weld that in, pull it out, weld it all up, drop it back in, and then weld it to the frame rails. So I want the uprights to come out of the trunk floor towards the end of where this battery tray is going to be, and towards this end, so much of the weight is spread as possible. So there'll be an upright coming up through the trunk floor there and through the trunk floor there. So it's just a case of measuring it from a point on this side, maybe measure that distance and then measure it from the underside as well. What you don't want to do is cut the squares off centre from the frame rail and end up having to cut bigger and bigger squares. It's the 2 holes cut, so what I tend to do is use, what's that, 40 by 40, 50 by 50 box. Yeah, 50 by 50 box. It's 3mm steel, I think. On the other side, what you want to do is you want to pick a point where you want the rack to mount to the frame, and measure the distance of the bar that you want poking through the trunk floor, depending on the height that you want it set at, and using your piece of box section with that flat up against the frame rail, mark your 4 corners with a pen, and then using a small drill bit, drill out the 4 corners. The same here. So these edges need cleaning up a little bit yet. So you mark up your 4 corners, so it's the frame, the upright sits flush with the frame there, so you can get 2 nice runs of welds against the frame rail. And then something to start your battery rack with. So I used a piece of flat bar, 50 by 25, again pretty decent 3mm steel. I've made it so the holes are slightly narrower than that one piece of bar, and then everything will work off that. So I've cut 2 of these, one the wheel end, the right height set, using some spacers to set the height how you want it. So these are 25 now, 40mm bit of tube there and there, stick that on that, and then you can measure the height of your tube it goes through. So back again, if we go underneath, this is the bumper end, so that should just about be the right height to sit up in there. So you get a full weld all the way down to the bottom of the frame rail, and then there should be a slightly longer one above there, it's only like a few centimetres longer, which will sit up in there. And then once you've got all your angles and lengths and everything cut right, This is just roughly done, this needs cleaning up yet. That's the first part of your frame rail. So there's your two ends, there's your bumper end. As long as you've got all your measurements correct, this bar should fall nicely through those holes, just like that. And then once you've got everything aligned and you're happy, you can weld those in. Now I weld those in last, so what I like to do is to make the rest of the rack, everything apart from the battery trays, so make your cross brace pieces and your pump mounts, everything off the car, going to and from the car to get your measurements, which we'll do in a minute, to make sure everything fits. And then once your rack's at the point of being fully assembled and you're happy with the heights and your angles and everything, you can weld those into your two hole points, and then weld your battery trays to the top. I've got all the paint I need now to make the rack look pretty. Doing another can of truck bed lining paint, and yeah, so let's crack on. Drop that there with those spaces there, just holding it up to more or less where I want it to be, so the rack sits nice and high off the trunk floor, like so. And if we go underneath, you can see where those rails have come through the holes, square holes in the trunk floor. Nice and tight, no big horrible gaps. This will get sealed up with Tiger Seal anyway. Nice and snug to the frame, so you can get a good weld. Obviously the frame will be clean, and same on this side. Nice and snug to the frame. And all the weight of the rack sits on these frame rails. And so not only does it stop all the weight being on the trunk floor, but it braces the frame of the back of the car as well, so there'll be a piece of steel going across the back there. Once you've measured and cut your holes, you can see square hole, square hole. What you want is to just be in line with the frame rail or just slightly beyond it, so the metal sits tight against the frame rail on both pieces. So I've cut 4 holes, and I've made 2 of these. It's still a bit hot. 2 of these form the basis of your pump rack. These are the bits that mount to the frame, nice and strong. Next job, I want to work out where the pumps are going to sit. So obviously the battery tray can only go so far up against here. You don't want it to be touching that. Get it nice in the corner. You can always clamp that down. I wouldn't weld it down yet. That's the last thing that I weld in with the battery trays, because it makes it really difficult to work on the car when they're in place. That's why I like to make them before I make anything else, so I can get an idea of the measurements. And then underneath there's going to be some sort of flat piece that'll come off at a 45 like that. The pump will mount to this, and this will continue. This is just a sample piece, ignore that. That'll continue onto another bar that I'll run across the back. That forms the brace, with another piece of 45 going along there for the other pump. And then we'll make something that sticks out here behind the batteries where you can't see them for the solenoids to sit on. So now I'm going to make, so I've made the 2 uprights, I'm going to make the 2 45s, the back piece, check all the clearances, make sure the motors don't hit the backs here, make sure the pumps don't hit the batteries. It's just a case of trialing, cutting until you're happy. It might be best to clamp these, if you've got some G-clamps, to clamp them to the frame in the positions that you want them, so they stay exactly where you need them to be. But what my next step is, once I've got these 45s on, and this back piece and that 45 on, and all the angles are correct for the pumps, I want to be able to lift the whole thing out, take it to one side, weld it all up, and then you know there's no welds incompleted on the undersides. If you were to weld these uprights in now, you wouldn't be able to weld the underside of these bars. So I want to be able to lift the whole thing out, weld it up, out of the car, and then drop the whole thing back in. And once you're happy with all of that, and you've mocked it all up and everything seems to fit all right, Then you weld in the frame mounts. We'll tack them in again, check your measurements again, make sure everything fits, and then weld up fully your pump rack mounts to the frame, and then that's it. I've missed a stage there. Once you're happy with it and you put it in, that's when I paint it. So it'll all get painted. I'll mask off where I'm going to weld underneath. So all the undersides of the steel will be painted. The only thing that doesn't get painted is the area where the pump mounts, but we'll show you how to mask that out in a minute. And then the area where the solenoids mount, because both of them will earth through the bodies. Another thing that I need to do is to make a little earth bolt. an 8mm stud to go through, so you can put your earth disconnect on. But yeah, we're getting there now. And we've got them crossbar pieces in. So yeah, I shall crack on. Significant amounts of cutting and welding later. We've got the basic shape of the rack in place. So you remember, there's the cross piece that we made. And the cross piece that we made. None of this is welded in yet. These are just got some ugly tacks holding it all together. And the idea is to measure it, cut it, measure it, cut it, so you're happy with your layout and that everything fits. This we'll show you tomorrow, or in the next section, because I'll have Sol with me filming tomorrow. So these come out. The pumps are obviously just loose, so they can come out. The solenoids are just loose. Everything can come out, and then this whole rack will lift up out of the trunk floor. Nothing's welded in yet. Everything's just tacked in place. So you can see there's the two uprights from before. They're still waiting to be welded in. And tomorrow I will be welding all of these up, making it as strong as possible. And then while it's out, drill the holes for the pumps, get them aligned where we want them to be. Work out where we're going to mount the solenoids, maybe get them fitted, and then paint it, I suppose. Where the solenoids mount, we'll leave this bare metal. Same with the pump, only you won't be able to see it. Everything else will be painted. It's going to go gloss black with some more of this. As you can see, I didn't want to do the second coat because I knew it was going to get damaged from the installation. But this will get cleaned up with another coat of bed lining paint. And once the rack's dry, it can go back in and then be welded. The parts that we weld down there won't be painted, they'll be bare metal ready to go in, but the whole rack will be painted all in gloss black, ready to go. While it's drying, I'll probably run the front hoses up through those two holes, and the rear hoses will come out of the rams there and around the back here, and that's about it. Other things we need to do is wire the switches up, run the switch cable underneath the carpets into the boot, and make a little termination block somewhere hidden out of the way. And then all the cable and wiring can be hidden underneath these rails, underneath the rails there, up around the back where those speaker wires are. And it'll look real neat and tidy, and then once it's finished we can test it. No idea what day it is. I've just been cleaning up those holes with a file to get a nice clean edge. I've also blitzed this with a wire brush as best I can. That's where the pump rack mounts will weld to the frame. I just wanted to check to make sure there was no other dodgy bits of holes or bad welding or stuff. So this is, you can see now the reinforcement that somebody's done. I think this is the original frame here, and then this is a reinforcement plate. That's a plate, then there's a gap, and then there's a plate, and then there's a plate there. It's interesting that there's a gap there as well. So again, somebody's had a go at reinforcing it, but how much actual strength I've added, I'm not sure. I'm not going to do much to this other than give it a coat of stone chip like I did with the front, just to make it look a bit smarter. But long term, if you wanted to further reinforce this frame, it'd probably make more sense to cut this off and to try and work with what's already here. And this of course is the before side. So I'm just about to give this the same wire brush treatment. Give it a wipe down with some solvents and then put a coat of stone chip on it. just to protect it, ready for the next stage. It was never part of the arrangement to clean up the frame rails, but I think the car's earned it, and I'd like to think that it's the start of better things. So that's the frame rails painted on both sides. As you can see, that's where the pump rack will be mounted to the frame. You've got the two uprights that come through the trunk floor, like that, and the other side's the same. So it's just been wire brushed, clean with solvents, painted with stone chip. I think that'll create a good base for whatever he decides to do, whether he decides to paint it or underseal it or what. So there's Sol, look, the main cameraman. Okay, so I'm just gonna hand over to Chief Cameraman Sol. So a lot of people will mount strings to the trunk floor, which doesn't give you any strength, doesn't give you any rigidity. This is a frame mount, so you can see where the rack mounts to the frame. It won't touch anywhere on the trunk floor. There'll be a gap all the way around it. These bits here are just spacers, just to show that it's sat up all the way around, so you can get in and out. You could run a carpet underneath that if you needed to. And then the intention is to be able to lift the rack out. So these obviously aren't welded in yet, these go in last. Put them to one side. So this rack isn't yet fixed into the car. We intend to build the rack outside of the car, so all of these welds, all of these tacks will be finished. But it's a bit tight. It will come out. So that's the rack out. And I'll just show that it. Again, it's a bit of a struggle. It's a bit tight. Once the rack's welded in, we'll tiger seal around these holes as well. Stop any moisture or anything from getting into the trunk floor. I'll show that at a later stage. So I'm just going to lift this rack out now, so just be careful I don't hit you with it. I've got to lift it out and angle it to get it out and put it on that pallet so I can carry on cutting and welding. A lot easier. So turn it that way first. I should be able to get one end of it out. There you go. Run all these welds in, make it nice and strong, and then once it's all welded up, you can have a coat of paint. This is going to have another coat of lead liner paint. It's had one coat, but in the process of installing and making the pump rack, it's obviously been scratched and damaged, so I'll run the hoover in here, give it a bit of a rub back, and then give it another coat, and then the pump rack will be in, painted, trunk floor will be painted, and then I can weld the frame uprights to the frame, the pump uprights to the frame down there, tiger seal around there, and then it's just a case of fitting everything. Gosh, I think so.